Okay, let's get started now on part two, ratios, proportion, and percent. Those three words basically all mean the same thing. A ratio is a comparison between two numbers. So if I had, say, 4 apples and 3 oranges, the ratio between those apples could be written as 4:3, like this. Um, or I could just as easily write that as equivalently a fraction like this, 4 apples to 3 oranges. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Or I could write the ratio of apples to everything, which would be 4:7, like so, which is 4/7. Okay, which is the proportion of the fruit that are apples. Okay, so that's another way of writing it. Um, so proportion is just saying how much something is, what fraction something makes out of the whole. So let's take another example. If I had 3 out of every 10 students, then let's see, 3 out of 10 students were male, let's say, then the proportion of male students is 3/10, or 0.3, right? So there we go. So that's proportion. Percent is the same thing, just rather than being out of 10 or out of some fraction, percent is always a fraction out of 100. So 3/10, I need to convert this. 3/10 would end up being 30 100ths, which is equal to 30%. Okay, those of you who know French can recognize that the word percent literally means per 100. So it's pretty easy to remember how percent works. All right, so what's important for us is the ability to convert between the three different ways of writing ratios, proportions, or percentages. So there are decimals, there's fractions, and there's percents or percentages. Okay, so we are going to need to convert between one of these to all the other three here. Okay, let's start by looking at how to convert a fraction to a decimal. So let's start with something like 3/8. How do we convert that? Well, we actually already know how to do this. It just ends up being long division. So what we're going to do is, hold on, it's not 8 in the house there. It's 3. We're going to divide 3 into 8 parts. So 3 is what goes in the house. So this is a little strange because 3 is the smaller number. But we're going to put some decimals here. So, whoa, what just happened? So we're going to put decimal and then 0, 0, 0. Just so we have some zeros so we can work with this. And then we do the long division. 8 goes into 3 0 times, and then we put a decimal down. And now, okay, 8 goes into 30 how many times? Well, it's not 4 times, because that would be 32, so it's got to be 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Okay, so 30 minus 24 is 6, and then we bring down a 0. All right, so now 8 goes into 60 how many times? Well, it's not 8 times, because 8 times 8 is 64, so it's got to be 7. So 7 times 8 is 56, and which leaves us with a remainder of 4, and we bring down the 0, and now 8 goes into 40 exactly 5 times. So which gives us a remainder of 0. So that is the decimal for 3/8. So 3/8 is equal to 0.375. Okay, cool. So we've converted from a fraction to a decimal. So in order to do that, it's just long division. Okay, next, we need to convert from a decimal to a fraction. Okay, so here we go. So we've got a decimal, 0.585, and I want to write this as a fraction. So what I'm going to do is write this, thinking of this not as a decimal number, but thinking of what this means. Remember, the first place is the tenths, then we have hundredths, then we have thousandths. So remember what that means. This is actually a fraction over 1,000, right? There's 1 0 for every decimal place. So we have 1,000, and this is 585 over 1,000. Okay, and now it's just a matter of putting this in lowest terms. Well, 5 goes into both 1,000 and 585. So how many times? Well, the quick method of dividing by 5 is dividing by 10 and multiplying by 2. So dividing by 10 would be moving the decimal place 1 spot, so that would be like there. Okay, so that would be 58.5, and then multiplying that by 2 would be 100 plus 16 plus 1. So that ends up being 117 is what 585 divided by 5 is. And then 1,000 divided by 5 ends up being 200. Okay, and there's that's in lowest terms now. The numbers that go into 200 are 2 and 5 in some amounts, and neither 2 nor 5 go into 117, so definitely in lowest terms. And that's how we convert from a decimal to a fraction. Just put it over the proper power of 10. Okay, converting from a percent to a fraction is very simple. Whatever the percent was, we're going to just write that as a fraction over 100. So the denominator is 100 all the time for percent. Okay, and then just get that into lowest terms. So in this case, 2 goes into 52 and 100, and so that's 26 over 50. Oh, 2 goes into 26 and 50 again, so that's 13 over 25. So 52% is 13/25. Okay, now let's talk about converting decimals to percentages and percentages to decimals. It's very simple. To go from a decimal to a percent, we're going to move the decimal point twice. That's all we have to do. It's basically we're multiplying by 100 because we're putting it over over 100 as a fraction, and then just ignoring the fact that it's a fraction. So this will give me 57.8%. Okay, and to go the other way is simply moving the decimal place in the other direction, so going this way now. Okay, so we went from 64%, and now this is going to be 0.64 as a decimal. All right, so that's it for converting from percent to decimal and decimal to percent. Okay, which gives us all the ways that we can convert. Okay, to convert from percent to a fraction, we just treat it as a fraction over 100. To convert it from decimals to fractions, we put it over whatever power of 10 we're talking about. Fractions to decimals, long division.
Okay, so that covers converting between decimals, fractions, and percentages. On to talking about percentage increase and percentage decrease.